Thank you, Carl. My name is Georgia. I'm an alcoholic, and I have been looking forward to this. I usually get really nervous before I talk, and I am tonight, so that's no different. But I was looking forward to being with you all because there's so many of my favorite people that go to this meeting, and I'm so glad to have Carl as a friend. You know, he was somebody that I remember hearing speak when I think I can't do math quickly, but I think I had a few years and heard him speak, and you know, looked up to him, and then we got to speak together at a conference, and I couldn't believe that I was with him, you know, and now we're great friends, and I think I have more friends than I ever dreamed I would have, and I have such a good life today in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am so very grateful for Zoom. So grateful. I think we've got it made compared to the average bear out there who's trying to fend through this madness. I feel more connected than ever. Yes, we can't see each other in person. Yes, we can't hug. But I have never attended meetings where I stare at all your faces for an hour. So there's this different kind of intimacy that's happening. You know, normally I'm looking at some of the backs of your heads, and sometimes I don't even see people in the meeting. And here I'm looking at everybody face to face, and I see the strange things you have in your homes, and the the strange animals walking in the background, and we get to know each other at a different level. And I've really been enjoying this, and I've been able to tour or travel all over the world and follow my sponsor like the Grateful Dead. I love her, and now I can go hear her speak whenever and wherever I want. And so I've just been enjoying that. I've learned that my unhappiness is in direct proportion to my resistance of reality. So the quicker I can adjust to what's happening, the better I do. And I have the best example of that in my sponsor, who seemed to flawlessly move into this new world with joy and humor. And so I'm grateful for the examples I have. I'm grateful that we bear witness to each other's stories, because you guys give me hope, and you guys keep me moving and accountable. When I got sober, I got sober in 1993, February 1st, 1993. I was 24 years old. And the way I communicated at that time was, if you asked me, how are you? That to me was, please list everything that's wrong. And so I would. And you maybe didn't want me to do that, but that's what I would do. And that's how my mom communicated. That's how my grandma communicated. So somebody says, how are you? And you go, the sons of bitches down at the DMV. Work is a bitch. I can't pay my bills. That jerk of a boyfriend of mine. Like, you just list everything that's wrong. And coming to AA, I came with that mindset of just looking at everything that's wrong. And today, it baffles me that I could take the same, let's say 5 facts about my life, and I could use those to describe my life in a way that would make you feel envious and happy, maybe happy for me, not envious, happy for me. You would think, wow, she's got it going. And I could take those same 5 facts and spin it in a way that would make you feel sorry for me. And it's my choice today how I choose to live. And today I try to choose joy. I need to be reminded all the time, which is why I'm going to a ton of meetings. I also find that I am not like my fellows in the way I drink, but I'm also not like my fellows in recovery. I find that I need to do a lot more than some of my friends who are perfectly fine human beings. They are happy, joyous, and free. They are useful, but they don't have to do as much as I do. And that's fine. It's just that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the ability to learn that about myself. And once I know that, then it's up to me to do what I need to do. Anyway, so I don't remember my first drink. My dad died of cancer when I was 6, and I was raised by a single mom who worked 3 jobs and was pretty checked out. She was depressed and angry, and when she was at home, she just sat in front of the TV and didn't want to be bothered. So I was a lonely kid. I was an only child, and I desperately wanted attention and love. And my mom, like I said, is checked out. So I was looking for it in school. I did well in school until 6th grade, I was student body president. 7th grade, I was dropping out to drink and use. So it happened very quickly. I started stealing my mom's car and smoking when I was 10 for the thrill of it, to feel alive. because the only feeling that I remember before that is sadness. I have memories and photos in photo albums that show that I did have happy times. I have little bits and pieces, but the overall feeling I had was the weight of the world on my shoulders and on my heart. And I feel like I was born singing the blues. Everything was so big and so hard. And so when I started hanging out with the older kids and I started doing these things that gave me that adrenaline and that juju, it felt so good. And then I started drinking. Now, I had drank out of adults' drinks when I was a kid, and so I don't ever remember my first drink. I feel like I kind of tapered on. The older I got, the more I drank. And by the time I was 11, I was arrested for drinking in public, which is crazy because you think an 11-year-old is just a baby. But by the time I was 11, I was about the height I am now, which you can't see. I'm about 5'7". I looked older than I was. I felt older than I was. And I had a 16-year-old boyfriend, which is just really gross. And it occurred to me, and it was just like last year, really. I was talking at a conference and I was talking about this thing, how I was always attracted to older men. And it occurred to me as I was at the podium, this thought. I always thought that older men were attracted to me because they found something special about me, that they could see that I was different and more mature. But what it turns out is they were perverts. And I did not know that there is no excuse for, I really, and I feel embarrassed about this. Like, how did I miss this? And other people on the outside could see it. And that's why a lot of the guys that I did hook up with, I was a secret. I used to listen to the Rolling Stones' Backstreet Girl, that song, and just cry because I so wanted to be seen and loved. And I was always a secret. I was a secret of an older guy or a secret of a married guy, or, there was always that shame. And my first higher power was your approval. I needed it like I needed oxygen. I needed you to tell me I was okay, not just like once, all day, every day. I needed like, you're so good, you're so good, you're so pretty, you're so smart all day. And nobody can do that. So I've got to keep finding more people who can give me that stuff and fill me up. And so I didn't realize until I got to the fourth column of my fourth step what that looked like. And my former sponsor, Pat Y, she used to say she was a friendly girl. And I'll leave it at that. I was a friendly girl because I was so desperately lonely. And I really believed that if I could just find someone to love me, I'd be okay. And I learned that, that belief was reinforced by watching all these family dramas or comedies on TV, or in every movie. All you do is you find love. And once you find love, everything falls into place. You find Prince Charming, boom, happiness. No, I didn't learn until I had double-digit sobriety that a man is not a plan. Oh, the time I could have saved. But anyway, so that's what I was looking for then. But the problem, going back to the starting of my drinking, is once I started drinking, every time I drink, I get drunk. So from the beginning, it was drinking with problems. Fun part. It was drinking with problems. I was arrested at the beginning and full of self-hatred. And I had a suicide attempt at 12 and I had a suicide attempt at 13. And I ended up pregnant at 13. And I terminated that pregnancy at the urging of my mom and my boyfriend. And this was an older boy. So he could have gotten a lot of trouble. So when we were poor and I had to get Medicare or Medi-Cal, I can't remember which one it is. But I had to go sign up for that. And I had to say that I didn't know who the father was so I could get the care I needed. So more shame and just embarrassment and sadness around that. And I didn't want to terminate that pregnancy, but my mom and boyfriend were pretty insistent. And I needed their approval. I needed them to love me. And there just was no other option. So I did that and then drank over that. I was collecting things to drink over. I was always looking for excuses. Some were real, some were imagined, some were exacerbated by the damage I did on top of those things. And so anyway, drinking like a pig from the gate. I'm in and out of school. I go to summer school or continuation to get to the next grade up until I graduate from high school, which was a miracle. During those years, my mom was working 3 jobs, and I think about her so much now. And I think it's just because as I get older, I have these layers of awareness that that I find. And I just realize today, sometimes I think my life is really hard today, and I have a really, really great life with more support than I ever dreamed of. And I think about my mom when she was my age. I was 14 years old, running amok. She would be going and working in a school cafeteria, cleaning somebody's house every day, different person's house every day, come home, and I might be waking up from a drunk because I've ditched school all day, getting ready to go get drunk again. And she had no friends. She never dated again. Her life was so hard, and she hated her life every day. And I think about her, and I realize the older I get just how blessed I've been, especially here in Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I graduated high school, my mom claimed bankruptcy and moved home to her mother. And I guess I did not know this at the time, but my mom's goal was to keep us in that same house, roof over our head, until I graduated from high school. She wanted me to have a better chance than she or my grandma had, which I'll talk about later. But so as soon as I graduated from high school, my mom claimed bankruptcy, moved away. And a pattern that had formed for me is that I would build my life up, and then it would come crashing down. I would bring it crashing down by my behavior, because every time I drink, I get drunk. No matter how many promises I make to you or to me, I can't keep them. In fact, when I got sober, I was like, I'm a loner. I don't really trust people. And I kind of felt like that was a badge of honor in some way. And somebody said, you know why you don't trust anyone? Because you've never been able to trust yourself. And I was like, oh, and then, like many times I go, oh, and then many months or years later, I go, oh, that was true. And that was true. I couldn't even trust myself to keep a promise. So I get a great job right out of high school. I'm fending for myself. I don't even know how. And it's at a nonprofit organization, and I work my way up the ranks, but I end up having an affair with my married boss, and I have to leave that job, and I get another job, but I get fired from that job. And just, it's a mess all the time. My life was so messy. And so I decided that I was so tired, and I was so tired of being lonely. And I just couldn't get why I was here. And so I had one last suicide attempt, and I had to have my stomach pumped. And after that, life was it was different after that. I don't even know how to describe it, but there was a loss of complete hope that I operated with from that time on. And I really didn't have a lot of friends. I really didn't care anymore very much about anything. And, but I still wanted to be loved. And my roommate had a brother who had a little problem with crack cocaine. Now, there is no such thing as a little problem with crack cocaine, but that's how it was phrased to me when she asked if he could come live with us. And so he came to live with us, and he and I hooked up, and his problem wasn't little, and he started smoking it again, and he was acting weird, and I can't be with someone who has a different buzz. So I asked to do it with him. And within 6 months, I lost everything. I got evicted from where I lived. I got fired from my job, and he sold my car for a piece of crack cocaine, which went for about $20. And I had no place to go. And so my best friend Diana's parents still lived in the town that we grew up in, La Crescenta. And she said that they have a room for you. They'll take you in. Now, Diana has been my best friend since kindergarten. She is magnificent. She's the prettiest girl I know to this day. We have had the most wild times. Just imagine anything in your imagination. And that's what we've done. Now, we used to party together, but she grew out of it, moved to San Diego, and started, adulting long before I did. And I stayed in and around our hometown, circling the drain. So while she's adulting in San Diego, I move in with her parents, who were always kind to me. And they were the kind of people who sat down to dinner at the same time every night. Her brothers and sisters would be at the table, and they'd laugh and talk about their day and fun events coming up. And they drank, so they were fun too. And so when they offered a place for me, I was really grateful, because I loved them, and I always yearned to be a part of a family. Now, I was there a few months before Diana got married. Now, Diana got married about 6 months before I got sober. She'd been married when she was 18 years old for a very short period of time. And really, I almost feel like it was just for us to have a party, because I was her maid of honor and I threw her bridal shower. It was fabulous, by the way. And then I booked the entertainment for her reception, and we had it in her parents' backyard, and it was just a rager, and her marriage didn't last. But now she's getting married when I'm living with her parents to the man she's still married to today. Like, it was the real deal, a real marriage. And so we all drove down to Fallbrook, where they were getting married at this place. And my drinking was really out of control. I could not predict what I would do when I was drinking. And I was trying to be on guard. I knew this was an important day, but it was so bad that I wasn't even allowed to see Diana before the wedding. I was her maid of honor, her best friend, but I can't even see her before the wedding because she doesn't know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to behave. And so the wedding starts, everything's fine, but I start drinking. And once I drink, no matter how many promises I make, I'm getting drunk. And I put on a good drunk that night and decided when it came time for her first dance that she was my best friend since kindergarten. She's only known this guy a couple years. What? I get the first dance. So I insisted that I take the first dance, which she agreed to because she knew she couldn't argue with me. It just give in. It's easier. And so the song I chose for our first dance was Tone Loc's Wild Thing, you know, like working all week, 9 to 5 for my money, that song. And I'm like grinding on her and I'm all bloated and she's in a beautiful tea-length white wedding dress, just the prettiest girl in the world. And to this day, every time I see her and her husband, I say, so sorry. They laugh about it now, but it was messy. But that's the kind of friend I was. I was the friend who, when Diana hadn't smoked, I'm like, you don't smoke? You know, I made fun of her. I taught her how to smoke. I said, you don't smoke pot? You know, she had, for a period of time when she was early teens, had gone to live with her dad and her stepmom, who were Jehovah's Witness. So she didn't smoke, she didn't drink, nothing. And that ended when she came home and we hooked up again. And I was just not a good friend. I remember one time we went to brunch and we would like stay at brunch until 6 p.m. or something. We'd go to brunch, they'd close the restaurant, but we were cute and we talked them into letting us stay and drink until they reopened for dinner. I remember coming back from one of those brunches and just looking at her and her face. I just didn't like the look on her face. I remember clocking her, and I don't hit people. It's not even, that's not me. But I just looked at her and I clocked her and she landed on the floor. And these memories have come back to me since I've been sober, because when I got sober, I thought I was a victim. I came into here like, you don't understand. You don't understand what I've been through. You don't understand the loneliness. And anyway, so I had been to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous with friends who really needed it, because I'm a good friend. But I always saw reasons why it wouldn't work for me. At the beginning, the first couple times I went, it was because I wasn't as bad as you guys. But now I'm worse than you guys. I always found some reason. And the God stuff really threw me off because I wasn't raised with any kind of religion. And if there is a God, I don't care for his work so far. So I'm not going to sign up for that stuff. So I tried white knuckling it for a while. Completely miserable. So I made a decision, really. I remember where I was standing in Diana's parents' house. I made a decision that if I was going to be miserable, I'd rather be drunk and miserable than sober and miserable. And I poured my first guilt-free drink in the longest time. And right then the phone rang. And it was a guy named Jeff Monahan. He's a member of the Pacific Group. He died last year. He was my Eskimo. He worked with Diana in San Diego. And Diana had begun confiding in him about her loser friend, me, because she learned that Jeff was sober. And so Jeff said, give me the number and I'll call her. So I pour my guilt-free drink and the phone rings and I answer it. And Jeff says, I understand you have a problem with alcohol. And for whatever reason, I told this strange man, and he was a strange man, but that's a side note. I told this stranger that, yes, I do. And he said, well, I want to give you the number of a woman to call in AA. And he gave me the number of Pat Y. And I called Pat and she said, my husband Vince and I are going to a meeting. Why don't you come with us? And for whatever reason, I said yes. And they took me to the big Wednesday night Pacific group meeting. And that was different than any other meeting I'd been to. I realized my perception may have been off at those other meetings. They may have been just fine, but I felt hope for the first time. But it always strikes me that a stranger called me, gave me the number of another stranger who took me to a room full of strangers, and I've been sober ever since. And when I try to think about what God's grace is, I go to that moment, because I qualified for this program so many times over the years. I have this fake tooth from sliding on my face across the quad when I was 13, because I was so drunk at school, following a boy, of course. But anyway, I qualified many times over the years, but I was done at this point. And Pat said she'd be my sponsor until I found one, and started me on a really simple course of action. Thank God. My life was such a mess. And, you know, I had never had any structure in my life. I'd heard of it. And what I thought it was the man trying to keep you down, people over 30 who don't understand freedom. And what I came to find out is that the more structure I have in my life, the calmer I am, the more creative I am, the more time seems to bend. Like, so many magical things come out of structure, but the greatest of all is freedom. Who knew? Who knew, right? So Pat has me going to regular meetings on regular days, get commitments at those meetings, and call me every day, which was actually kind of nice because I was so lonely. And it was nice to have somebody to talk to, and somebody who said I could bring me all of your problems. Oh, I got a ton. I'm happy to do that, you know? And so I just started getting just a little bit of structure in my life, and I started feeling better right away. Who knew? So I'm 24 and a half, and I'm like, I've already wasted all this time. I got to get on the fast track, you know? Got to get a good diet plan, got to get a good exercise plan, go to school. You know, I've got to quit smoking. And now that I'm well, time for a relationship. And luckily I shared that with Pat, and she suggested that I just get my first year foundation, that all that time and energy, I'd want to put it into getting my steps done. Into going to school, put that into getting my steps done, get a little job to go to in between meetings. Don't quit smoking, no major changes. And for God's sake, no relationships. So I started doing that. And let me say this too, that I identify as an alcoholic, and I believe my alcoholism gets me wherever I'm weak. So that can be food, sex, money, drugs, whatever. My alcoholism is always looking for a way out. And for me, it manifested in all of those areas. For instance, at 13, I started starving myself. So I'd be skinny and perfect, so maybe you'd love me. And at 17, I started throwing up for that same reason. And I said yes to every drug that was free and you gave me. So yes, for many, many years. And it wasn't until I addressed my alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that any of those other issues got resolved. I always thought they were all separate issues. But for me, this is just my experience. For me, it all falls under the alcoholism umbrella. And so as I began to address my alcoholism in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, great things began to happen, and quickly for me, because I was part of a really active home group. And that's one of the benefits of being part of a home group, is everybody's doing the same thing. Everybody's saying the same thing. So you just kind of get in the middle and you go, and you're like, where are we going now? And you just go where everybody's going. And it was easy and it was fun. And in our group, we do all sorts of extracurricular stuff, like your group too. You guys are a super active group. I was about 2 weeks sober when a family friend came forward and told me all these secrets that my mom and grandma had kept from me. And my relationship with my mom and grandma was strained. I loved them desperately, but I hated them and blamed them for my life. And I was ashamed of them and felt responsible for their unhappiness, partly because my grandma told me I was. She was charming. And she used to tell me what a disappointment I was and how I ruined my mom's life. And so I did not like her very much, but she was my only family. And there was always something strange between them. And I'd been through all of their personal belongings over the years, trying to uncover the secrets of me and why I was so screwed up, because it had to be their fault. And, but I'd given up that notion. And this family friend came forward and told me all these secrets. And I was like, I knew it. And I wrote them all down in this little book, but instead of taking them to my mom, which was my plan, I took them to Pat and I said, look at what I found out. And she said, it's so good that you have that written down. You're going to need that later. And I had no idea what she meant. She said, but for now, I want you to start working on being a good daughter and granddaughter. That sounds crazy to me. Like maybe she didn't hear me. But what I came to learn from this experience was that I am only responsible for my side of the street. What you do on your side of the street, none of my business. In fact, the dirtier your side of the street is, the cleaner mine needs to be. And I don't think I could have stayed sober with all of those conflicting emotions about my mom and grandma. It was such a source of pain for me and angst. And so set aside those notes just for today and work on being a good daughter and granddaughter. So what is that? I don't know. Call once a week, write once a week, visit as often as you could. That was the formula we came up with. So I started doing that, and I started sending a card once a week and making the call, which was awkward at first, but eventually it started getting easier. And eventually I started picking up the pace in the cards I was writing and writing about my adventures in sobriety. And then as I do, I'm either a piece of crap or I'm grandiose. In this case, I become grandiose, and I start thinking about how they must be savoring these lovely cards and my beautiful writing, and maybe keeping these cards in a beautiful decorative box or tied with a lovely ribbon. And maybe they take them out and reread them from time to time. Oh, that Georgie, remember this one? And it turns out that's not what was happening. I made my weekly call to my mom many months into this process, and my mom said, well, we've been getting your cards, but Grandma's been having to white them out to reuse them, and we're wondering if you could start writing them in pencil. And and so I did, and I want to tell you why I did. I did because I had a sponsor who told me I could bring all my problems to her and I'd never have to go through anything alone. I was starting to have an experience of my own higher power as the result of going through the steps with a sponsor. I had more friends than I ever dreamed I could have, more like real friends. And I was learning that I had more tools than I ever knew existed. And it may not be fair, but he with the most tools has the most responsibility. And in this case, it was me. And so I started writing the cards in pencil and wrote a little bit less to punish them for a while, which they didn't notice. Story of my life. But it started getting better. And another thing that came out of this process was in these loving actions that I was taking toward my mom and grandma, in making the calls and writing the cards and picking the cards and writing and filling out the envelope and putting the stamp on and putting in the mail. All of those loving actions were filling me with love. That emptiness that I felt inside, that I was always trying to get something from the outside to fill it, it was coming from within. It was the love that I was giving was filling up that emptiness. And listening to your stories and showing up for people who were sick and or old, because I was afraid of my old grandma, people who were older, people who were sick, whatever, showing up for other people, listening to your stories made me more brave with my mom and grandma, made me more compassionate. And I began to take all my mommy stuff to my sponsor and to my girlfriends, and I got to just be a good daughter. Who knew? I was maybe 3 years sober. Marilyn's been my sponsor since I was 2. So the last 26 years almost. So I slipped through a card and pen. And I swear to God, I didn't mean to. Maybe it was Freudian. I don't know. But whatever. I made the weekly call and my mom said, well, we got your card, but it was in pen. And I wasn't feeling as spiritual that day. And so I quickly got off the phone. Oh, look at the time, I've got to run. And I called Marilyn and I said, that's it. I call, I write, I visit, I'm done. And Marilyn said, I think you've made a wonderful amends to your mother and grandmother, and you don't owe them anything else. And I said, yes. And she said, however, I think it would be a wonderful spiritual exercise if you continue to do so. And so I did. And I'm so grateful that she gives me that direction to do things that I don't think I can do, to focus on my side of the street. So anyway, I made it to going back to my first year. So I'm doing the living amends with my mom and grandma. I'm going through the steps with a sponsor. I make it to a year. Miracle. I couldn't believe it. And in our group, we have a watch. So everybody gathers the night before you turn 1. And as it gets closer to midnight, they start getting closer to your booth. closing in till 10 seconds to midnight, where they count down to midnight and then sing happy birthday. And it's a rite of passage in our group. And it's such a fun event. And I swear there must have been 200 people at my watch, because I had been to everyone else's watches. That's the rule. You can't have a watch unless you go to watches. So you don't sleep for like a year. So I wanted this damn thing. And so it was really fun. And I stayed out of a relationship for a year and about an hour and a half. At about 1:30 a.m., I consummated a relationship with my new fella. And we got engaged 2 weeks later, and we were married 6 months later. And we were married my first 5 years of sobriety. And honestly, those were some of the best years. And the reason why is because AA was always the central point of our life. We always stayed close to our sponsors. And we got to do a lot in our world with AA at the center. I think sometimes we think, if AA is, I don't want my whole life to be about AA. I mean, isn't that just a replacement for alcohol? I plan my life around AA. And as a result, I've been able to do all sorts of things. I've been able to pursue dreams and travel and meet great people. And anyway, so we were married my first 5 years, and we split up, and I got involved with someone else right away. And then I had a major back surgery. I had to have a spinal fusion, and I was told if everything goes well, it'll be a 6-month recovery. And I was in that percentage where it did not go well. And I was bedridden for about a year. And it was my home group that took care of me. And this is really important. Sometimes I forget to say this, that we go through things in our life and we think certain people should be there, but they can't for whatever reason. You think my best friend, my sister, my mom, whoever it is should be there for me. Sometimes they can't be. And what I've learned is it's not personal. It's not about us. And God puts just the people we need in our lives at just the right time. My mom and grandma could not be there for me. I still made the weekly call, sent the card. I kept my side of the street clean. They could not be there for me for whatever reason, but my home group was. And I had to have babysitters every night. And I had people babysitting me that I honestly wouldn't have had a cup of coffee with. I'm like, ooh, no, not her. But what it did is it gave me the opportunity to slow down and to get to know people and to learn to work a whole new kind of program, because my early program was high velocity, action, 24/7. I just went and went and went. I was young. I was like, said yes to everything. Now, all of a sudden, my life is just laying down. And so I had found my usefulness in being of service and helping other people. So I learned that a way to be of service was allow people to help me, which was so humbling. But it also, it gave me the opportunity to get to know people. And I'm so grateful. Keith Carpenter used to talk about the seemingly good. That's how he talked. And the seemingly bad. And so I look back at my life, at the seemingly bad times of my life, and they have turned out to be some of the best times of my life, and where I have the most cherished memories. And it's amazing, because if you had told me everything I have to go through in sobriety, I'd be like, oh no, I'll just take that next drink, please. I would not have wanted to do it. But it's just like when you start the steps, you're at step 1 and you're looking at step 9 and you're like, I'm not making those amends. Well, you don't have to. You have to do step 1, and then you're going to do step 2. And each step is going to prepare you before you get to that step. So that's been my experience. We're given just what we need, not always in advance. Sometimes it's right on the spot. You're given what you need. So I ended up during that time losing everything. And the guy that I was dating dumped me. He said that he considered a relationship and a commitment when I was well, and I was devastated. Today we're friends, and I forget to say that. Back then, not so much, but he and I are in the same home group, and we have a ton of fun together. But back then, he was not my friend. He hurt me. And I called my sponsor to tell her what had happened. And being the understanding sponsor that she was playing guitar in the background. She was learning to play guitar at the time, which was a great way to get direction. But I told her, I would call her and tell her each time something new happened around this surgery, like had surgery, complications, can't work, got to quit my job, can't drive, got to sell my car. Like every day I was losing more and more. So I called her. I'm like, now I got dumped. And so she said, this sounds like a wonderful country western song. And she started playing a country chord progression on her guitar and sang my blues. And it made me laugh. And that has been one of the greatest gifts of my sobriety, is finding humor in everything. And having a sponsor who finds so much humor in my darkest moments has been just a treat. But really it is, because she's the funniest human being I know. And I can pray for a character defect to be removed. And I was so full of uselessness and self-pity. But what normally happens is an assignment appears. And in this case, it was a man named Mike Fitch. He was 34 years old, and he'd been diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And I watched him go from walking and talking to being paralyzed from the neck down. But his joy level never dissipated. He was funny, and he sponsored tons of people, and he went to conventions, and he just, as he lost more of his freedoms, his physical freedoms, he just adjusted. Get the wheelchair, get the handicap van, get somebody to help me. You know, I've never seen anybody face that kind of illness or death in that way. And he used to say there's no cure for ALS except for AA. And so he was such an inspiration to me. And his wife had also left him when he was sick. And so we had that in common, and it brought us together, and we became friends. And then we became more than friends. And I was able to help take care of him until he died, which was a great blessing in my life. In falling in love with him, I found something redeemable in me, because I had always measured love in what I was getting. And I was beginning to see this is one of those times where I did not have the tools to do this until that moment. My dad died of stomach cancer. And one of the operations they left a big hole in his stomach. And my mom used to have to put medicine in this hole with a tube. And I was daddy's little girl. And one day I asked if I could help. And so I was holding onto the tube, and then it was just too much. And I let go because I was scared, and it sprayed everywhere. And so it was one of those memories that used to haunt me. I'd be walking down the street, and it would just like be in my head. And what am I going to do about that? How is Alcoholics Anonymous going to help me with that? Flash forward, I'm with Mike. He gets the feeding tube, and he says, I want Georgia to feed me. And I'm like, no, you have to tell me if it sprays everywhere that'll be okay. And he said, no, that would be bad. And so I told him what happened with my dad, and he said, let's just give it a try. And so I did. And I walked through that with him, and I became the #1 feeder and medicine giver. And who knew that there would be that kind of resolution? But so many things have happened to me like that in sobriety, do-overs, spiritual do-overs. And so about a month before Mike passed away, my grandma died. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the line of my regular calls and cards, she started saying things like, you know, your grandma loves you. No, actually, I didn't. Are you okay? But so I didn't say that. I said, well, I love you too, but cautiously optimistic. But she continued to be nice grandma. And I started calling her Granny Goose, and we started having this sweet relationship. Who knew? But I think just as our disease ripples out into the lives of the people we love, so does our recovery. And although she never stopped drinking, never picked up a book, never went to AA, she was changed in many ways. And our relationship was good. So when she died, I was able to be there for my mom, and I was able to be there with no regret. Remorse and regret is a tough weight to carry. And today I don't have to do that, because even today, even though things stay in a place of regret, maybe for a little while, they stay in that place until I can either use that experience to help someone else or use that experience to change something I'm going through. So anyway, I was able to be there for my mom emotionally. I still was living in San Diego with Mike, and then Mike passed away a month later, and I ended up moving back to LA. Today, I still have health issues. I have chronic pain, and we're not supposed to say our case is different. But if you have chronic pain, I will say I feel like our case is different. But what that means for me is I have to do twice as much to feel half as good. And so what I said at the beginning of the meeting is I have to do a lot more than some of my fellows, just because it's just how it is. And I use Pilates and Alcoholics Anonymous for my pain today. But anyway, back then I was still trying to find my way out of this and trying to get well. And I moved back to LA, and my mom asked to see me, and I drove up to where she was living. I now had a little job, and I was getting back into my regular home group and trying to get my life to somewhat normal again. And I drove up to where she was living, and she said, there's some things I need to talk to you about. I was waiting until Grandma was gone to tell you these things. And so we spent a weekend talking. And she started by telling me that at 8 years old, my grandma was sent to live with another family because her parents couldn't take care of her and her sister. And the house where my grandma was sent to live, she cooked and cleaned and was physically and sexually abused. And the way she got out of that was she got pregnant by a man that she didn't love and had my mom. And by the time my mom was born, my grandma had already left that man and then started leaving my mom to stay with other families. And then in boarding schools. And when the other kids would get picked up for summer vacation, my mom wouldn't. And she would spend those summers with the nuns in shoes that didn't fit her. I mean, it was just the saddest story. And my mom, like me, just wanted to be loved, just so badly wanted to be loved. And when she was given the option to go live with her grandma as a teenager, to go live with her mom, my grandma, as a teenager, she did that. And it turned out that my grandma had turned to a life of racketeering and prostitution. And so she turned my mom out to work that business. My grandma had been running she was a madam out in the Mojave Desert. And so those years that my mom told me about where she was physically abused and sexually abused and working that business and, talking about tricks and all these words I'd never imagined my mom saying. I didn't even imagine my mom ever having a life really before me because everything was about me, and she had 2 children that she put up for adoption when she was a teenager. And suddenly it made sense why she was so insistent that I terminate that pregnancy when I was 13. I thought she was doing it because she was saying, you're bad and rotten and you must be punished. She was saying, I've done it the other way and it's heartbreaking and it hurt me so deeply. I mean, she didn't say those words, but that was her experience. And her experience of life was without many of the tools that I've already talked about in this meeting. She was a lonely person who didn't have any friendly direction. She never had, I had one roof over my head my whole life. My mom was home every night. There was food in the fridge all the time. As I was listening to my mom, I began to see that I had the life of a princess compared to the life that my grandma had, my mom had, and that I could have likely had. And I began to have a mad crush on my mom. And that was such a great feeling because she was fabulous. She was so funny, and I would have missed it had I followed the well-meaning suggestions of therapists who talked about setting boundaries and not keeping secrets and all of those things. But in AA, I was taught about love and tolerance and about my side of the street. And so I got to love this woman. And one of the secrets was that my mom, and this one I had heard when I was 2 weeks sober. Most of these are not the secrets I wrote in my book when I was 2 weeks sober. They were really little ones. These were mind-blowing. And I'm so glad I didn't hear them when I was 2 weeks sober because they would have been all about me. And instead, I got to just listen to my mom and say, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and do what we do, which is one of the greatest things we do is we listen to each other without judgment. And I think she was so afraid I was going to judge her and hate her. And honestly, at 2 weeks sober, I would have. But so my mom and dad were never married. And so there was a great deal of shame in that because my dad was married, just not to her. And so when he died, his survivor benefit went to his wife, not to my mom. And so all these things began to line up, and it was another level of freedom. And I need to wrap up my talk here, but I want to bring you to present day. My mom ended up getting cancer a couple years later, but that time that I had with her was probably the most magical of all. I'd already been behaving well, but now the feelings had caught up. I was actually feeling the actions. I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that I can't wait to feel something to do it. I've got to take the actions and the feelings follow. And I'd been mad at my mom my whole life for not giving me something that I thought that she possessed and withheld from me. But I found out it was that she never possessed it to begin with. And so we had this amazing couple of years together, and then she got lung cancer, and then it went to her bones and her brain. And I was able to help take care of her the last few months of her life. And you know, since then, I was married and divorced another time. Relationships have been slow for me, but I went through a suicidal depression with double-digit sobriety and went through the steps again and beefed up my program between 15 and 17 years. And since then, I've been tapped back into that joy that I found when I was new, because it's always there. It's up to me. If I do all of the stuff to stay sober, work on my spiritual condition every day, it's my actions that bring about that joy. Chasing happiness, I've never been able to get it. If I chase shiny objects and other people, it is always elusive. But if I look to how I can be of service to you, it is the byproduct of that. But being of service to you sounds like a drag. But now I have enough experience to know that it's not, that it is joy. And so today I'm in an amazing relationship with someone that I really love, and he does not complete me. Thank God, because what it means, if he completes me, it means without him, I'm incomplete. Then I'm resentful at him for not filling me up. So I learned that here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And next to getting sober, the best thing that's happened to me is working at the Midnight Mission in Skid Row, where I am right now. And it is so hot in here. Our air conditioning is down. But I get to take all the love and hope I get in these rooms every day to Skid Row. And all of this stuff that I came with, like this pile of crap, has turned out to be the gold. It's all the goodies that I have to share with others today. Finally, I've always found singing very cathartic. It's been a big part of my life before and after sobriety. And so when I got sober, I was taught, follow your passions and desires. And so I took singing lessons. I took singing classes. I did every show that you can do. I've done like 40 musical theater shows in AA for fun and for free, and you get what you pay for. But it was my passion and desire. So I kept working hard, but it was always like I have to work twice as hard to be half as good. And so I thought, why would God give me this passion and desire only to have me suck at it? And I thought it was a cruel twist of fate. And then I came to work at the Midnight Mission, and I was faced with all these people who have no access to art and music. And so I started a music program, and I started bringing musicians to Skid Row. And it started out as a monthly program, and now it's a weekly program. And it's just, maybe God gives us those passions and desires, not for us to shine, but for it to shine through us. And so I just got to stay out of the results, but follow those passions and desires. Anyway, thank you so much. So grateful to be here and to be